This is Akashwani Hyderabad, and today in our English Talks program, we have with us a global business service expert turned author, Mr. Tony SALDANHA. Hello, sir.
Hello, very nice to be here. Thank you.
Sir, Mr. Tony ran a multi-billion-dollar company for close to 3 decades and is now creating new business models using information technology. He is currently the president of Transformant, a consulting organization that advises over 20 Fortune 100 companies across the globe in digital transformation and global business services. Sir, once again, I welcome you to our studios.
This is a real honor. I have to say, I grew up with All India Radio, and to be on here with you is a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. So today our conversation is going to revolve around digital transformation in Indian perspective.
Yes, of course.
So firstly, I would like to congratulate you on releasing your new book that you co-authored with Mr. Philippi Passerini titled Revolutionizing Business Operations, How to Build Dynamic Process for Enduring Competitive Advantage.
Thank you.
Sir, I say this content is very much relevant to where Indian companies stand now in digital transformation. So what do you think companies can do to deliver sustained competitive advantage here in Indian context?
So one of the big insights behind the book was the realization that in today's world, you not only need a great product, whether that is a shampoo or a pair of shoes, but in addition to that, you also need really good operations, like supply chain or sales or marketing or finance.
The back-end work.
The back-end work. And you saw that during COVID. The organizations, the companies that struggled with their supply chain were the ones that did not have the back end.
Okay.
And so the whole idea behind the book is that more and more going into the future, we're going to need not just great products, but also great business operations.
So this is something like a continuation to your first book.
It is. The first book was more about technology, why digital transformations fail. I think this gives us the second part of any change.
Correct.
Because as you know, people, process, and technology are the three things that drive change. So the first one was about technology. This one is about work processes.
So you say it works, after working on the technology part, if you look at the back-end works that also run with digital transformation, you can see success. That's what you meant.
Absolutely. I think the two have to come together.
Yes. And when Indian companies started to adopt information technology at various levels in their organizational setup, how did it work in the initial days?
Well, growing up in India and, being there in the early days of technology, of course, we were coming from a little bit of a lack of knowledge of technology with the hardware and software not being there. After the 70s and the 80s, where a lot of software engineers started to move to the US and to other places, you saw a real mushrooming of capabilities. Now, fast forward to 2023, India is the digital factory for the whole world. And I don't mean that lightly. Quite literally, the biggest software companies in the world, Microsoft, Google, Apple, have their softwares built in India. And so I think India is in a unique position today to not just, drive employment and social responsibilities within the country, but also play a global leadership role.
Good thing that you said we have transformed from brain drain to driving employment.
Absolutely. That is so true.
So do you think it's any way different from how the digital transformation took off in the West or in the European countries or other Southeast Asian countries?
It is different. Obviously, India had a little bit of a late start on digital technologies. But what makes us special is the fact that we were able to leapfrog. We were able to jump generations. Now, you and I, of course, saw the effect of that. We kind of leapfrogged the entire generation of landlines in telephony and then ended up, through our frugal innovation with having some of the best quality, cheap call rates, mobile phone rates
Correct.
in the entire world. That is true leapfrogging. And so that's what has happened also with the IT industry. I think India did a good job in not just catching up, but in jumping forward with respect to the other countries.
So we started off from offering our services to the West with respect to information technology. Now we are into services and we are also into manufacturing. I'm talking about the Indian perspective.
Yes, yes.
So do you think the same model applies when you talk about manufacturing as well? Because we also started making raw materials for our own products.
Yes. I think that is a proven model. Most countries that start with manufacturing usually start with, either doing products or even, making copies of templates that the West provides. And then from there on, you move on to innovation. This is how Japan started. This is how China started. And so the model of leapfrogging on manufacturing is absolutely going to apply to us.
So we see a bright future ahead.
Oh, very, very. There's no doubt about it.
And the global presence as well.
I think global leadership is here to stay. This is one of those things that, when you have talent, raw talent available, and then you combine that with really good education systems, and of course the right infrastructure and investment, which we have seen in the country over the past decade or so, only good things can happen, and it can go only one way, right, which is upwards.
Yeah. Mr. Tony, you've been part of this ecosystem right from the beginning in India. And then you travel places. You've been in the US, you've been in European countries and several other Asian countries in the leadership roles.
Yes.
So I would like to ask you, do you think the current trend that is happening with respect to digital transformation, do you think are we in line with other countries and other ecosystems?
Very much so. I think that digital transformation, which I define as, building technical and process capabilities to get ready to win in the fourth industrial revolution era. Because make no mistake, we are in an industrial revolution right now.
In the transformation phase?
I think
from the third to fourth?
Exactly. So digital transformation is what you need to do to thrive in the fourth industrial revolution. So going from the third to fourth is something that takes digital transformation. With respect to other countries, again, I see two things that work in India's favor. One is the immense talent, that we talked about. But there is one other thing that acts in our favor, which is, I think, the spirit of innovation, the spirit of jugaad, the frugal innovation.
I totally agree with you on this.
And, you and I were talking earlier about how this shows up even in the startup ecosystem. And so that works to our favor. I am very bullish. I think, we're going to see some very bright futures ahead.
This frugal innovations, upskilling themselves up and then going on a bigger platform and on global platform, like you said, I think the future is definitely bright.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the whole principle behind frugal innovation is, necessity is the mother of invention. And so if you take two people, one of them has a lot of resources, the other person has a hunger, the person that has the hunger will always win.
I agree. And quoting your first book, Why Digital Transformation Failed, can you give us some key points from this book and what can we learn from this? And this happened just before COVID happened.
It did, yeah.
So much of digital transformation happened during the period of COVID, lockdowns or whatever it is. So give us some key learnings from your first book, which is also a bestseller worldwide.
Yes, it is. So the timing of the first one was, I think, in many ways fortunate. So the answer to why digital transformations fail, if I simplify it, is it gets down to two things. One is language, the understanding of what do you mean by digital transformation. There are a lot of people that, confuse digital transformation to digital technologies. I mean, I met 100 people, CEOs, startups, venture capitalists in writing the book. And it was surprising to see the variety of explanations. Some people said, oh, it's all digital stuff, like digital watches, which we had in the 1970s. So don't worry about it. It is just hype. And of course, others said, no, it is, the revolution, the industrial revolution, and upskilling in order to thrive in that, which is the right definition. So one is language, the clarity of understanding of why you are doing digital transformation. The second is the discipline in following the right steps to drive digital transformation. Digital transformation is only about 10% about technology and 90% about human change management. And those are very different disciplines. One
and
is
difficult as well.
And of course, yes, 10 times more difficult. And so why digital transformations fail lays out those two causes. One is clarity of the goals and understanding, and then the second is the understanding of the discipline required to do that. Now, when COVID struck, something interesting happened. The world started to see the impact of the adoption, which is the organizational effect. You take the population of the world and you give them a good motivation on why they need to adopt that technology, and you start to see the snowball adoption. So that is exactly what COVID did.
Correct. So how do you think we can undo this? Is there a way to stop companies from failing the digital transformation?
There is, and I think it is like most other things. When an industry is relatively new, right, whether it is, the medical industry or manufacturing, or, so on and so forth, there is a lot of confusion about disciplines and terminology, which is what led to, IT digital transformations also failing. By the way, I should mention the statistic that 70% of all digital transformations fail. That is a terrible statistic, but true. 70% of all projects fail to meet their original objectives. Now, the book has provided a checklist because I've been influenced by a lot of the checklist work that has gone on. It started in the airline industry, and, one of the Indian doctors, Atul Gawande, applied it to medicine and improved the reliability, the success rates of surgeries. All that I'm doing is applying those proven methodologies to digital transformation.
Wow. Talking about medicine, Mr. Tony, India is famous for its medical tourism.
Yes.
There are a lot of AI-assisted surgeries and robotic surgeries that are performed at a very lower price compared to other countries. So that's how people from other countries are coming to India. And now we have a lot of medical technology giants establishing their manufacturing units here in India. Do you think that will play a level playing field, causing more competition, more hospitals taking up technology?
For sure. There's absolutely no doubt about it. India was already seeing a lot of medical tourism, mostly driven by some of the medical services being unaffordable in Western countries. Whereas here you've got, Indian trained doctors that are extremely skilled because they work on not, 100 or 200, but, literally thousands of patients. And they are not just very skilled, but they also do it at affordable rates. So medical tourism is here to stay in India. What robotics, AI, and other technology is adding to that is a level of success rates and precision, and also accessibility. There are companies that are now, bringing their manufacturing, as you said, of the medical tools into India, not just to support the rest of the countries who will benefit from that manufacturing, but it is also going to support this industry of medical tourism, because then some of the best tools in the world get employed as part of medical services.
And I would like to tell you, after conducting G20 summit in India, we have had some learnings.
Yes.
So we got to know that India is the third biggest startup ecosystem among G20 countries.
That's an incredible statistic. That's a wonderful statistics, by the way.
And 40% of these startups are now unicorns. And few have also grown up to be multinational companies. They have global presence now. So now what's your advice to these companies on adopting digital transformation flawlessly?
So there are three things that I would say. Firstly, avoid the two mistakes that I had talked
Already
about
mentioned.
earlier, right? So clarity of goals and then, of course, the human side. The second that I would share with startups in India is that, it is always possible to be the disruptor when you have hunger. So don't fall into the trap of chasing the money. Stay hungry, stay with the spirit of jugaad, and you will always be successful. But then there's one other thing that I think that's really important to share. We tend to think of startups as, companies that will become big and, will create products and then, of course, have that growth path. But I also believe, having worked in large companies, that the startup ecosystem is an extension of the resource and the money that big companies have. Big companies need startups to drive innovation. And so the third piece of advice I would give startups is to partner as part of the big company ecosystem. That's a good way to give innovation to the big companies, but it's also a good way to get a lot of money flowing into the startup ecosystem.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Mr. Tony. And there's another learning I took back from G20 Summit that is about women-led leadership.
Oh, yes.
So talking about women leadership, it's there in many fields, but do you think there is some leadership lagging in technology?
Yes, of course. I mean, it is fairly well known and acknowledged that gender diversity in IT and in technology is a problem. It is a problem in the US, it's a problem in India, it's a problem in most countries in the world. I think it is a shame because in reality, as we were talking earlier before the recording, there is 3 times a return of investment possible if we focus on women's education, because that cascades down through the children into generations. That needs to be also translated into the IT and other technology fields. So, some of the statistics that you were sharing about Telangana and how a lot of leadership is coming out of women really makes me happy because, I think the state is doing that correctly. We need to continue to have focus and emphasis on getting more, not just women participants, but women leadership in technology.
That's so true. And I think there need to be some effort put in to fill this gap.
Yes, it's not going to happen. If it's Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So there has to be something different.
A conscious effort?
A conscious effort. And I think that is a combination of course, goals and policies from the government and company leaders. But I think also a social pressure which is created so that, gender equality is an expectation from every organization.
Right. And now, Tony, I would like to take the context from what you're talking before. Talking of business operations.
Yes.
How is it a key to the company's success?
Business operations at the end of the day is not just about providing products and services at a lower cost. That's typically what back offices have been doing. And that's why they have been looking for lower cost options, including, using like the Tatas or Infosys and Wipros out of India, the business process outsourcing industry. That was the start of the industry. I think we have now learned that the real value beyond lower cost of business operations comes from business agility and innovation. So business operations, and yes, I'm talking about operations like payroll and accounting and supply chain, manufacturing and production. All of the data that you can generate out of those operations can now be used with data science and technology and AI to then innovate and to create even more value to the company. So business operations going forward is the key to not just cost reductions, but innovation and completely new business models.
So with respect to business operations and the AI assisted marketing strategies and all, if we can talk about some examples, do you think, what are the learnings that we can take from successful global business chains, like be it Amazon or Apple?
So I think what most successful companies realized, including Amazon and Apple and Procter & Gamble and others, about AI, is that it's really important to separate the hype from the reality. Because, and here's something really important. You know, they say the future is already here. It is just unevenly distributed. That is true of AI. So there is a lot of use cases around AI. About 7 or 8 years ago, before ChatGPT, before a lot of the AI hype, I came across a medium-sized company where the CEO, the admin assistant to the CEO, the scheduling for the CEO was being done by an AI robot.
Wow.
So the point there is that that use case of using AI to do routine work like calendaring, that is established. So the question really is, why aren't we using specific use cases? That's really what successful companies do. They don't fall for the hype. You know, we have to put in big money and, you know, try to understand what AI is. No. What they do is they understand what already works, and then they scale it. They make it bigger. They move fast on the stuff that already exists.
So to put it simple, one step at a time.
One step at a time, one use case at a time, and then, you know, the future becomes here and now.
So talking about technology tools like ChatGPT or AI, these things come up and completely they take over the market. And we've been talking about the business model and the consumer, but talking about the employees who work for the
Yes.
company. You know, how do you think they take this change, transformation, getting used to the change, and then something new comes up and they need to upskill themselves? How does this dynamic work in their perspective?
You know, it can be really challenging, as we have all seen. You know, not just talking about others and employees, but even for ourselves as human beings, right? We are not geared for constant change. But it is something that can be taught. This is one of those things that I had to teach myself. This is something that big companies are able to train their employees on. So here's what we need to do. First and foremost, we have to make sure that we are giving our employees the ability to keep up. So I'll give you an example. The IBM CEO has said, you know, he is going to invest in taking the existing people of his company and training them instead of hiring more and more people. That's a decision that is relatively easy to make for most companies, right? Why don't we take the people that we have and put the money there? So that's on the employer side.
Investing on your existing resource.
Absolutely, yes. So on the other side, if I'm the employee, my responsibility then is to be open, right? Now, we will always have a spectrum of people. You know, some of them will be more change resistant than others. But obviously, the ones that are more open to change will be the ones that end up, you know, using all of this change as an advantage.
Correct. And talking about Indian perspective again, not just IT and services, but now Indian companies are also into pharma and manufacturing like never before. We spoke about that. So which sector do you think has the advantage of having high digital progress, and which sector do you think needs more work to be done?
You know, obviously the IT industry, with the experience of the last 2 or 3 decades, already has an advantage. It has it on software. But, you know, jumping from software to hardware related, including operating systems, is not too much of a leap. And so it's not a surprise to me that Apple and many other companies are now looking to India in the IT space for manufacturing. So that's one sector. I think the other sector we will see a lot of is actually going to be in the, you know, supply chain and trade area. Again, some of the Internet of Things, some of the IT enablement that's possible there is going to be a helpful force in that particular space too. And then the third, is space. I mean, again, the combination of Jugaad and, Indian education is clearly making the space industry a high potential, high stakes area. And I have no doubt that that's going to be another industry that takes off.
Even in space industry, Telangana is taking a huge leap forward.
Yes, I heard. That's brilliant. I mean, I think kudos to Telangana. I mean,
Dhruva Space is now establishing a very huge place for its innovation and marketing as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's absolutely fabulous. Yeah.
So I'm boasting a lot right now. I could
I
understand
think
that.
you should. I really think you should. See, it's really important for people to understand when things work. Sometimes as humans, we're attuned to things that are negative because that's the way our DNA is. But it's really important to kind of share success stories.
Right. So Indian government is also very keen on digital transformation.
Yes.
And now Indians are relatively very, very, very digitally literate.
Yes.
So government is also encouraging manufacturing in India under schemes like Skill India, Make in
Yes.
India, and so on and so forth. So there are innovation hubs across the country encouraging frugal innovators. With your global expertise, I ask you to advise these innovators and innovation hubs across the country on how to make the best use of AI or ChatGPT or any other technology tool for that matter for their best advantage.
So once again, I would say three things. One, when it comes to high technology, separate use cases from hype. Can a robot completely replace an admin assistant? No, because a secretary does a lot more things than calendaring. Can AI replace the calendaring function? Absolutely. It already did that successfully 8 years ago. So that's what the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice I would give is that, ecosystem power is really important at this stage. There are many innovations that are already happening in India, around India. Pool your resources. Look even among the startups. Who can you partner with? Who can you get new ideas from? That is really, really important. The third thing I would say, which is going to sound a little odd, but the third piece of advice I would give people in the startup community is move up your communication skills ladder very quickly. I advise a lot of venture capitalists in the US, and it is true that startups that do a better job of communicating their ideas also end up getting more resources. So that's another thing that I would remind people.
Communication is definitely the key.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tony, for your time. I'm sure this information helps our listeners who are entrepreneurs already and who also aspire to be an entrepreneur in future. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an amazing learning experience.
Oh, you're too kind. This was a real honor and a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.